Well, time check, it's 7:08 in the city of Abuja. It's Citizen FM 93.7, and welcome to the newspaper headlines. My name is Lawrence Moite. I'm doing this alone today. Kemi Ashekun is not around, but I'm sure she will be back before the weekend. And we are going to look at some of the headlines today. I have a guest in the studio. Philemon Ajekuko, you're welcome to Inside. He's an economist and a public affairs analyst. Welcome to Newspaper Review.
Thank you, Lawrence. It's great to be here.
And it's great to have you. And in the next 45 minutes or thereabouts, we will take a look at the stories in the major newspapers across the country. And at the half-hour mark, we will throw the phone lines open, and you'll be able to call in. But you can be part of this program by joining our new YouTube channel. You can watch us live on YouTube, our live stream device. So just type in newspaper headlines on Citizen FM, and you will be part of this show. You can also send us a WhatsApp message when the time comes. Once again, my guest is Philemon Ajekuko, economist and public affairs analyst. Once again, welcome to Newspaper Headlines.
Thank you, man.
Okay, let's start with the Punch newspapers. And there's an interesting story. It says INEC summons security chiefs and political parties. Let's see what the story says. It says the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Mahmoud Yakub, has summoned a meeting with leaders of political parties over the reported clashes among their supporters in some states. Yakub disclosed this in Abuja during the training of Master's Trainer on Election Technology for the 2023 general elections. It says the hostility between the political parties happening barely 3 weeks after campaigns officially kicked off, and the political parties and their presidential candidates signed the peace accord under the auspices of the National Peace Committee ahead of the commencement of the campaigns in September 28th. That's been hostile and abusive verbal exchanges between the supporters of the All Progressives Congress presidential candidates Bola Tinubu and the Labour Party flag bearer Peter Obi, and on and on and on. How would you react to this?
In the first place, I think it's a good move. And as they always say, it's better to nip things in the bud before they get out of hand. I see a lot of trouble coming on our path, and there's a reason for that. If you look at the previous elections, politicians had a lot of leeway to rig. For instance, I remember 2015 election, 2019 election, before the introduction of, for instance, the card reader, brought a bit of sanity into the process. But then the law back then made it possible for you to use both the card reader and the voters register, as well as the form EC8, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
But in the next election, you're going to be using beavers. A lot of the avenues through which politicians rigged election in the past have been cleaned up and cleaned out of the system. So what is going to happen? Two things are going to play very strongly in the next election. One will be the use of money, and two will be violence. Violence in different forms. There's what I call diversionary violence, where you go to the stronghold of a candidate, for instance, and cause trouble there, just to ensure that their supporters don't have access to vote. That is going to play a major role in the next election, except proper steps are taken now to nip things in the bud. So what INEC is doing, I believe, is in the right direction. And the courts, too, also have to pay attention to this. I recall in the 2015 election, the Supreme Court more or less ignored the impact that violence had on the election. It was difficult to prove certain things in their own wisdom, that you cannot bring the issue of violence into the process. But then violence had a major role to play. And I can give instances. So if we are going to do things differently in 2023, then the courts must take proper notice of the issue of violence. And I think, I'm not sure now whether INEC has prosecutorial...
they don't.
They don't. So if they don't, it means that the onus is now on the judicial system. So that has to play very strongly.
And the police too, because in fact, I think that the police should be pushing this, because this falls squarely on their domain. INEC should rather be more interested in conducting election and not because they don't have the powers to prosecute. They can only advise.
The problem is when the police does not appear to be a non-partisan body. For instance, you have a situation where governors can call police people to go do this and do that, where the president or whoever can call police officer to go and do this or do that. Now, in a proper setting, the police is not to be taking orders from a politician. Their role in any society is well defined. So if there's going to be an election, their role is to make sure that there is no threat to peace. And whoever, even if it is a governor of a state, even if it's a minister, even if it is the president of the country, a police officer has that duty to caution that person, and where caution is not taken, a police officer has the powers to arrest.
That's how it should be.
That's how it should be.
Anyway, let's leave that for now, and let's move on to some other political story. There's this story in the Vanguard newspaper that has been on since yesterday evening. Wike endorsement of Sanwo-Olu morally inappropriate. That's coming from Atiku's aide, Osita Chidoka, former head of the FRSC. Special advisor to the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, and the party's presidential campaign council member, Osita Chidoka, has described Governor Nyesom Wike's endorsement of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State for a second term as morally wrong. This is not the only one speaking about this. A lot of PDP chieftains too are not very comfortable with this. What do you think?
Well, scruples and politicians, they don't really go very well together. Just take a look back to what has happened between 2015 and now, and look at the way politicians have moved from one spot to the other and taken diametrically opposite positions to what they said before.
And what they were known for.
And they don't have any, they are not bothered about it. So we're going to see more of such things. I don't think that it's something that anybody should worry about, because they have become part and parcel of the system. It works for them very well.
But I'm worried. Is there no place for morality in politics?
No, there is no place for morality. At least not in this part of the world. Perhaps some other places, yes. But generally, in politics, there appears to be no morality. You do what is convenient for you at a point in time, and that's okay, as long as it serves you. Otherwise, why would somebody say one thing today and tomorrow he says something that is completely opposite, and he feels fine with it? But that is the way it runs. It's about self-interest. It's not about country. So as long as that self-interest is served, everything is fine.
But it sure looks like as if the citizens too are okay with it. Nigerians are okay with it.
And what I'm even bothered about is when Nigerians begin to dwell on the small issues and leave the big issues. Nigeria is in a serious situation. But the political class always has the way of diverting the attention of citizens. So they throw certain things at us, and then we talk about those things. And before you know it, it's election day, and the deal is done. They're back in power.
Well, let's still stay on Punch. And there's this story that was also very shocking. Came in yesterday. It's also a political story somehow, but it also has to do with the Constitution. Yesterday, the Deputy President of the Senate held a press conference, and he spoke on the. He gave an update on the alteration of the Constitution, the process. Remember that the National Assembly had done its part and sent the clauses to the state houses of assembly. Now, he said that only 11 states voted for constitutional amendment bills 6 months after transmission. Let me just read one or two paragraphs from that story. It says the two arms of the National Assembly said yesterday that 11 states of the Federation have voted on constitutional amendment bills transmitted 6 months ago. Deputy Senate President and Chairman of the Review Committee announced this yesterday. According to him, 25 states are yet to act on the bill and are, now listen to this, requesting the National Assembly to include establishment of state police, State Judicial Council, streamlining of procedures for removing presiding officers of state houses of assembly, and so on and so forth.
Doesn't that tell you where our priorities are? The question has always been, what is the priority of the Nigerian people? We have this idea. That's why I sometimes feel very uneasy when somebody says, "Oh, I'm coming to restructure the system. I'm going to break it down and rebuild from the ground up and all that." No country grows without putting its constitution in place. And as has been repeatedly said, the constitution is not cast in stone. It must move with the time. And when it doesn't move with the time, the people are left behind. The country is left behind. So a situation where you have a new constitution in the making, 6 months after, only 11 states have paid attention to a very crucial document, national document. That is the document that runs the country. That's the document that will determine how fast or how slow or whatever we can go. That is a document that keeps us together as one people, that gives us the comfort to believe that we are one people, that we are together. 6 months down the road, states have not reacted.
For me, it's worrying because these are lawmakers. Now, there are processes for activating the alteration of constitution, and the lawmakers should know.
Yeah.
Now, it looks as if they are trying to do a political bargain. Say, except you put this in the clause, except you put this, except you put this, we are not going to pass this. And every state in this country has a lawmaker representing it in the National Assembly. If this was important to the state, why was it not presented during the debate at the National Assembly?
I think it goes back to our attitude to development issues. I would expect that if you know that these will be the likely obstacles on the way of any process, you put certain things very early on in place, like you suggested. You foresee the problem, you take those problems into cognizance and start working your way up, addressing those problems as you go. Now, there's something that also bothers me about Nigeria. I think we are too tightly bound. I don't see any reason why, if Delta State wants to have a state police, let them have a state police. If Ekiti State doesn't want to have a state police, well, so be it. Does it do anything to the fiber of us as a people? If I decide to do what, it's just like I hate referring to other countries. Every state actually should be able to run on its own rule. There should be some disparity between what one state wants to do as opposed to what the other state wants to do. Because this system where we are all running a particular model hasn't worked for us in 60-something years. I don't know whether it works, but for me, it hasn't worked. So if it hasn't worked, Why are we still holding on to it? Is there something in it that is satisfying certain interest? These are some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves.
Perhaps. Well, if you're just joining us, it's newspaper headline review, and my guest is Philemon Achekoko. Is an economist and public affairs analyst, and we've been picking his brains on some of the stories in the newspapers today. Let's move on to another issue that has been sad in the last couple of days, and that's the issue of flood across the country. It's so massive. Yesterday I was watching a footage of Bayelsa State. Virtually 1/3 of the state is submerging in flood. But let's look at how the Vanguard newspaper puts it. It says flood. Delta, Kogi, Anambra, Benue governors cry to FG for help. And the story says the governors of Delta and Bayelsa State, Kogi, Anambra State yesterday appealed to the federal government to immediately come to their aid to avert a looming humanitarian crisis following the devastating effects of flood in the state. Speaking separately on the devastating impacts of the flood this year, the governors said the situation has overwhelmed them, hence the need for urgent support from the federal government. How would you see the situation?
Well, we've always had problems with floods, and somehow we have not come to terms with it. But now things are getting a little bit worse, and that is because of the issue of climate change, which we cannot deny. Unfortunately, Africa is responsible for a very minute section of or part of that problem. It's a problem that has been generated more or less by the Western countries, but the effect of climate change is universal. It is global. Once something goes wrong in one part of the world, if it has to do with weather, it will spread to all parts of the world. So the world leaders are tackling it at one end, but then each country has to find a way to resolve the issues. Is it a small problem? No. And how should we go about it? That is the question we are asking ourselves. One is to know the areas that are vulnerable. There are certain areas that are vulnerable. So, ab initio, government has to find a way to make sure those areas are protected. For instance, just take for instance the Lokoja Axis, which is a major gateway into Abuja. For the past how many weeks we've not had the food supply and petrol supply and all that and all that. Now, you would expect that the federal government would have done something about that area, particularly to ensure that that bottleneck is not doesn't come up again and again with the rains every year. So, in addition to that, we need to have a countrywide plan of what to do with rainwater. Once that is done, we'll be able to substantially reduce the effect, because there are countries, don't forget that there are small cities around the world that are built on water. So how did they live? So the threat is real, and since it is real, we must plan for it and ensure that even if there is a major flood, it does not affect lives and property the way it has this year going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially if you look at the Cameroon connection. It's always been there.
Right.
It just didn't happen this year.
Yeah.
It's always been there every time. And we should, in addition to a national outlook, we should also find a solution to that, so that at the end of the day, maybe that's just part one, what the government can do even at the state level. There are a lot the state governors can do. Even at the local government level, there are a lot. Granted that this year's, the flood we are talking about is massive. It's not something that, you didn't clear drainages and stuff like that. This is huge.
And it's all over the world.
It's all over.
It's all over.
Just
all
like
over.
you said, we need a long-term plan
Yeah.
and a short-term plan
Yeah.
for now to deal with the issue now. But more importantly, a long-term plan, maybe 10 years, maybe 15-year plan. Just wish away and say, okay, want to do this and do this in 1 or 2 years.
And it's going to get worse going forward, except we get out of fossil fuel and reduce the effect of climate change. And I don't see that happening in very quickly, because we are more or less tied to fossil fuels. To get out of fossil fuel is expensive. And you could see that even countries that are advanced are finding it difficult to get out of fossil fuel. You see what is happening in Europe, the energy crisis as a result of the war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. So it's going to be here for a long time. That means that it's not something we can wish away. So the earlier we plan for it, the better.
All right, we'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll take some stories. There are other stories that are interesting in some other political part, other newspapers that we need to take. My guests will still be here, and when we also come back, we will throw the phone lines open. My name is Lawrence Moite. Don't go away, please.
Once upon a time, for one village where they for air, everything they go well. Them they enjoy better things until them great grandpillar them tell them say he get one secret where they for inside calabash, for inside bush. Elders them gather, them send them ezemwo inter bush, impact in ngongo and then janja take inside bush. When he see the calabash, where them papa hide for inside bush. Time to open the calabash. Ezemwo hard then knock. Last, him open the calabash. What's in me the secret where he comes see?
As we bring them out, Abuja, how far? Hashtag man up, tab yarn, mind your language. That's here, and the plenty casual bitterness mixed with correct Naija song. Now them be inside Evening Your Love with SMO 1 Radio Street Brief for 93.7 Citizen FM Abuja. Flex Evening Your Love, Monday to Friday from 5 o'clock for evening, go reach 9 o'clock for night. Evening Your Love with SMO 1 for 93.7 Citizen FM.
Ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Most times, people commit one offense or the other due to ignorance and negligence. Some get into one trouble or the other out of ignorance. Wheel of Hope, a human rights advocacy program on Citizens FM 93.7 Abuja, is here to educate you on issues that relate to your fundamental human rights, tenancy agreements, contractual issues, next of kin, and many more. Jide Abdulaziz and his team of legal luminaries will be treating issues that have been giving you stress by providing mediation, intervention, arbitration, and many more. Every Saturday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. on Citizen 93.7 FM Abuja. Wheel of Hope will improve your citizenship responsibility. Wheel of Hope Human Rights Program on 93.7 Citizen FM. The voice for the voiceless and the oppressed. Don't miss it.
I bet it crossed your mind. Stay connected to the Super Citizen Show as we enjoy a great radio experience on 93.7 Citizen FM Abuja. It's the full package. Let's take you back, way back. Let's celebrate the African people, culture, rich heritage, and wealth of excellence on African Vibes on 93.7 Citizen FM Abuja. Stay abreast. Get informed. Know what's happening around you on News Roundup. And when it's 4:30 p.m., you know it's time for quizzes. Do you think you know Nigeria? Answer 3 questions correctly and be one of our daily winners on quizzes. That's why we say it's the full package. It's the Super Citizen Show with Didi. 3:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Mondays through Fridays on 93.7 Citizen FM Abuja.